Who would have thought that a literal militant group with like definitive terrorist links, fundamental theocratic view of this world, would somehow go and do the most inclusive thing ever?
If you've ever been on the back seat, you know that is the riskiest spot.
That, in a way, it's actually a Congress that's different from the last election cycle. You know, we have a neighbor like China that's salami slicing in territories of ours like Arunachal Pradesh.
Since we're getting into this, I thought I'll tell a joke.
Yeah.
It's about the two communists.
Okay.
You know this one?
No, I don't. Now, 1 lakh rupees per poor person.
Let's do the math.
Let's do the math. Right.
There are people who are gonna call this a cheap stunt.
So you're just glorified gangsters. Don't give me this thing about you having seen this. You know, you're the one outside, the allegorical cave, and you've seen the truth, and everybody else is still in the cave and an idiot.
Before we just get into it, I wanted to just talk about rash driving in this country. In Mumbai, and I've seen it in Delhi, you're just on a road and suddenly you'll hear the sound of a removed muffler supercar just whizzing through the roads and just, like swerving, taking you over and stuff like that. And it bothers me so much, the level of risk they are putting other people in first, of course, and themselves stupidly so.
Yeah.
And it's this weird thing. I feel like they think they're like Formula One drivers, like they're secretly, Schumacher or whoever the Formula One driver is right now, but they think they're Formula One drivers, just swerving through traffic, like, wow, look at me, I'm so cool and impressive. Overtaking these people who don't know they're racing with me.
Correct. Yeah.
Like,
that's the part. They actually think there's some kind of race going on and they have to come first. And
all to just end up with me at the same signal behind 20 other cars.
Yeah. Or like it's like a pocket of empty road and then you're back in the same traffic jam.
Yeah.
It's like
just looking at me. I was like, what were you doing? Just making noise, causing risk. I really don't know why cars that are commercially sold are allowed to have speed limits of like 240 kilometers. What is the logic? Where can you even drive it?
Yeah. Certainly not in Mumbai.
It's illegal. How can you sell a product advertising a set? Nowhere in the world would it be illegal to drive on a road at 240 kilometers an hour.
Yeah.
And if you're buying it for commercial use, there should be some cap on in like a legal car, like how you need a seatbelt. Your car should not be able to exceed like 120 kilometers.
Yeah.
Why do you need to go faster than 120 kilometers an hour?
See, like as someone who myself enjoys a bit of fast driving, I do think that there's a difference between like controlled fast driving in that setting. Like if you're in an Autobahn in Germany where you actually can legally drive at the speed you're saying, and even when you're on the fastest lane, there'll still be someone that tries to overtake you. So that's how fast it's going there. But there is a general regard for the rules, and in Mumbai, it's properly reckless, man. Like in Delhi and Mumbai, what we've seen, we know people that have lost their life and have taken other people's life by just driving recklessly. So
I know people who they're driving on the ceiling 180 kilometers an hour, and they're Instagram storing it.
Yeah,
I'm like, holy shit, I'm stressed. How do you live your life?
How are you not stressed?
How are you not stressed right now?
Yeah, I'm like white knuckling it even when I'm like not even going that fast. I don't even know what I would be doing at 180. I'd be freaking out for my life probably. So yeah, I think there needs to be, you're right though, India does have a abysmal road safety record, by the way, like very, very bad.
I'm not at all surprised.
Yeah.
Every day that I make it to office from Mahalakshmi to Andheri without my car hitting anything, it's nothing short of a miracle to me.
Yeah.
Because some of the nakas there are insane.
Yeah. And it comes down to, I think a lot of it comes down to how well we're actually teaching people how to drive. I don't know if you remember how you got your license in India, but my test was, okay, drive straight. Okay, now reverse. All right, you're good. And what's even worse, my brother, I think he went with like a driving institute, and dude, the RTO did a batch sample. So they called 2 people from the driving institute If they pass, they're like, all right, we'll just give it to everybody. Can you imagine? So that's why people don't know how to drive. Like, it's dangerous. You people have literally never done the driving test. That's the thing. Like the RTO is notoriously corrupt. But, speaking of the road safety and accidents and things like that, I do think that there's like active effort being made. I know, and like people are trying to put heads together on how can we maybe design roads that are preventative, at least, or guide people to not go that fast, but it's a human thing.
Well, it's good. Enforcement on drunk driving has increased a
big
lot in Mumbai.
Big time.
Mumbai is good that way.
Yeah,
They don't.
very, very
They
good.
really.
Helmets has also improved a lot. Like in a lot of cities now, it's an automatic challan, right? They give you a ticket automatically just through camera. So,
Yeah.
but
I don't get does the backseat passenger have to also wear a helmet?
No, I think that's the odd thing. Like they'll ticket you if I don't know what the exact law is. I'm pretty sure it has to be both, but more often than not, you'll get caught if the person in the front, if the pilot doesn't have their helmet, which is bizarre because if they have someone behind without helmet, they can still die.
If you've ever been on the back seat, you know that is the riskiest spot. That is the spot.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel safe to me at all. Like when you're in close to the center of mass of the bike, you still feel some type of control on it. When you're on the back
some
seat,
control.
you feel insane. You're at the mercy of, just these two little rails at the back.
And if you hold the person in front too tight,
you can't do that.
You can't do that. You can't do that.
I felt like one time I was doing it, I was like, you know what, I can't risk it. It was in Goa, someone was dropping me somewhere. I was like, dude, I'm holding on to you. I don't care if you feel weird about this.
Yeah,
There's
let
no
the
way.
people think what they gotta think, but I need to
feel safe first.
Yeah, I need this hug for safety. But in things that we were reflecting on this week, I wanted to share like an uplifting story.
Good.
I think for the week, right? I think when I believe it started in this town in Italy. There's this concept of slow food, right? So the idea is that you had fast food, right? So everything is it's how quick can you make it? So you're compromising on quality of ingredients, this, that, and the other. And this whole movement was, hey, can we slow down the process and focus on ingredients and kind of meaning behind the food? Similarly, I want to think of news, like slow news, right? Everything wants to be fast. So with that in mind, some uplifting, good story.
Okay, slow news.
Slow news, right? I read this just this morning, and it was a beautiful story because now elections are 7 days away, as we're saying. The largest democratic exercise that the world is about to witness is going to start. And this story just made my heart swell with pride. So a 100-year-old person in a town called Sironcha village, which is actually the last taluka, right? The last area in Maharashtra that is at the border of with Telangana and Chhattisgarh, right? So now these areas have been dominated by or they've been ravaged rather by the Naxalite movement. So essentially a militant Maoist kind of revolutionary movement that has devastated large parts of this country, right? That it's a very sickening ideology when in practice and has like ripped families apart in a lot of these areas. But what was beautiful is that in Sironcha, a 100-year-old person, and I noted down the name because I was so impressed, named Kishtaya Mother Boina. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I apologize if I got it wrong.
I thought you couldn't read your own handwriting because it looks pretty off.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. The election commission has gone down to this extremely dangerous remote area just to make sure that this person and another 87-year-old villager in this village exercise their right to vote. So on the news, you're reading all these things, democracy is dying, this, that, and the other. And here's a story that should let everyone know what a vote means to people in this country. It means so much. And I think everyone, as elections come, should go and register because, everyone can talk the talk. You and I are talking the talk now. But can you walk the walk? Right?
There are people who are going to call this a cheap stunt.
Yeah, maybe. But you're enfranchising two people in dangerous... And then the other uplifting story was a town in Bastar. So Bastar has again been ravaged by Naxalite activity for years, decades, right? It's held back any prospect of progress in these areas. And the election commission is having to airdrop polling teams, from helicopters into these areas just to help the villagers. Even if it's 20 people that are staying there, they deserve to go and vote. It is their right as an Indian citizen to go vote. So that is how we view elections. And I think that is a beautiful celebration of democracy. And everyone should remember that. And you should keep that in mind when elections come around and you have to go and vote. Don't be the person on the fence who has the opinions but is not willing to go and actually, cast your vote. So, two very beautiful stories, I thought. I don't know if you, yeah.
I think it's really great that
Yeah.
stuff like this is happening. What I'm just curious about is, with how much we politicize media right now,
Yeah.
would there be any type of, the BJP is trying to show how it is trying to encourage voter enfranchisement when it actually is not? Or how would you read these select cases as, are they supposed to be distractions from what a lot of people are saying is at the end a rigged election?
I don't know. Because see, this actually does not even have much to do with the BJP. This is the Election Commission of India. This is their mandate. So that's how much they respect their own mandate. If my mandate is to run an election such that everyone that has this right to vote is able to go and cast their vote, we're going to do it, right? Now, certain areas might be really, really, really difficult, where to the tune of, I think some people, like this person has to the EC committee has to go almost 107 kilometers into like a jungle just to go and help people vote, right? So this is not something, lives are at stake. You're doing this because you genuinely believe that people should go and deserve a vote, and it has nothing to do with the BJP. In fact, the ECI has been doing this for years, right? How can we get more and more people the ability to vote? People that want to vote but can't vote for whatever circumstance, go and get them to vote. And in these communities, what just angers me sometimes is that this movement that's supposed to be oh so noble, right? Like your Naxal Maoist militant movement, it doesn't care for this. It doesn't care for democracy. It's actively ensured that people can't vote there. So you're just glorified gangsters. Don't give me this thing about you having seen this, you're the one outside, the allegorical cave and you've seen the truth and everybody else is still in the cave and an idiot. So yeah, I'm just happy to see, and yeah, it's like a festival of democracy, I think, at least. Yeah.
Excellent.
So yeah, so that was the uplifting story, and now on
the funny one.
The funny story.
We had a laugh about that,
dude. I mean, this is.
Let's read it out.
Yeah. So the story, I believe, the exact line was.
It's from the Tatva.
The Tatva, right? And they were saying how the Taliban, I say that again, has decided to return land to Hindus and Sikhs in a step towards greater inclusivity. Now, reality is truly stranger than fiction, because that is insane. Who would have thought that a literal militant group with like definitive terrorist links, fundamental theocratic view of this world, would somehow go and do the most inclusive thing ever? It's like, it doesn't add up. It's almost insane. Yeah, reality is stranger than fiction, man.
I think we can put that down as a happy story, not just a funny one.
Happy story. Like, it's a start of Always Sunny in Philadelphia is one of my favorite shows, and there's always like funny titles. And this is like, yeah, Taliban goes woke. Who would have thought?
Yeah.
Who would have thought they'd be going the DEI route? Anyways, but very happy to see that they are recognizing that a lot of this land was taken away from other minority communities and returning it. So that was my funny and now happy story of the week.
Good. So should we get into it? I mean, you were talking about the election commission.
Yeah.
I know we're going to get into some of the voting related things mentioned in the manifesto.
Let's dive straight in.
And let's dive straight into it. So the Congress has released its manifesto. The Communist Party has also released its manifesto.
What a sad place. I don't know. It's just like you're so outdated. But at the same time, you have a Communist Party of India that is like legitimately fighting in democratic elections.
And holds power in 2 states today.
Yeah.
So since we're getting into this, I thought I'll tell a joke.
Yeah.
It's about the 2 communists.
Okay.
You know this one?
No, I don't.
So 2 communist friends, and one says to the other, "Hey, if you had 2 houses, would you give me one?" He said, "Of course. I'm a communist. We're communist. Of course I'll give you a house."
Yeah.
"Okay, if you had 2 cars, would you give me one?" "Why are you even asking me? We're communist. Of course I'll give you a car."
Yeah.
"If you had 2 chickens, would you give me one?" "No." "Why?" "You'd give me a house if you had 2 houses. You'd give me a car if you had 2 cars. Why wouldn't you give me a chicken if you had 2 chickens?" "Well, because I have 2 chickens."
Yeah, dude, that's like,
And I think this joke for me encapsulates a lot about the idealism of communism,
yeah.
and on some levels, I guess socialism even.
Yeah, and socialism for me, I would say even for me, that's something where I'm a lot closer to and in agreement with, a robust welfare state that supports those that are less fortunate, or not just less fortunate, that supports everyone in the country. I'm reading this tremendous book on the session of one of my mentors. It's called Accelerating India's Development. And he has a wonderful analogy in the start. He says, look, in the end, a country like India, let's say it's an airplane. Take an airplane as an example. Say you have the wealthiest individuals in the country, the elites, and the middle class are, say, in the first class and business class sections of the plane, and everybody else is in economy, right? So you're enjoying you're having a different experience on the flight. But if that flight is going down itself, if it's going to crash, it doesn't matter what seat you're in, you're all going to die, right? And he's using that analogy to say that doesn't matter if you don't actually need to avail of the state services, if you don't need that welfare, it's good to have a state that is capable to meet the needs of development and meet the needs of its people, right? Especially in times of crisis like COVID. He was using COVID as an example. When COVID hit, it didn't matter if you're in business class or in premium economy or first class. If we were going down, we're all going down together. So you need a robust state that can provide and build that capacity,
Yeah, and look at it. If you want to look at it through self-interest rather than through altruism, maybe that's a fair utilitarian way to look at it, because the truth is, if inequality increases, there will be a breaking point. People will not stand and they will rush the gates.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a point at which people will not be able to accept the divide.
Yeah.
And it will go down. So you better, if in your own self-interest or if you're so short-sighted, just literally thinking about your next 6 months.
Correct. Think towards the future, right? How can you build a place that's more or less equitable? You're going to have injustices always. You're going to have inequalities. But can you have the intent? Like that's what we were talking about in the last podcast. Intent, right? That's all you can judge a person by in a short time frame, especially in a country like India, where it's hard to see the difference policy is making, even in a 5, even in a 10-year window. It takes time to see difference, right? So you need to at least see the intent always.
Okay, so let's look.
Speaking of intent,
let's look into the policies and maybe discuss what the possible intent behind these could be. Yeah. I think there are some good things about this which we've discussed with really good intentions.
Yeah.
A bit of a balancing act they've been able to play in some respects.
Correct. I think just let's dive straight in. So, I'm sure there's so many people that have gone in and like sliced it word by word, sentence by sentence. I think what you're saying is the right approach. I'd like to just broadly look at what are the, maybe 10, 15 things, or what are the broad ideas that Congress is essentially saying that they're going to deliver in this election, right? And then see, why they're saying it, whether they can actually see it through, and go to what the intent might be, right? So let's start with their biggest promise that's been most hotly debated, is the Mahalakshmi scheme.
Okay.
Right? So their broader focus, or maybe let me back it up a bit, right? So they're saying workers, the poor, women. So it's focusing extensively on social justice, on inequality, on upliftment. So right from the get-go, all very noble ideas, right? I think that no one can say that this is not a noble thing that they're trying to do.
100%.
The means through which might be actually extremely problematic and have very dangerous consequences, which we'll come to. So Mahalakshmi scheme being one of the things that they want to do, which essentially is a lump sum every year to poor families.
Okay.
Note, interestingly enough, they don't define what a poor family is, probably for intentional purposes. 1 lakh rupees to the oldest woman in the family. And if there's no woman in that family, then the oldest individual in that family. I believe that's the exact idea. Now, 1 lakh rupees per poor person.
Let's do the math.
Let's do the math. See, now, I think just today, there was a conversation with one of the members of the committee that drafted this manifesto. And he said something that was very fascinating, right? So after being pressed by Karan Thapar, he mentioned that the number that they're looking at in this scheme in general. So this plus some of the other freebie related schemes that they want to give out, right? I believe some to do with student loans, a few more schemes, but a lump sum.
Student loans, sports scholarships.
Correct. So a few of these, I think 4-5 of them, coming to 5 lakh crores over a 5-year period.
Okay.
Right? So 1 lakh crore a year. So if you had to give a lakh, Ron, where does that bring me?
To 1 crore poor people, we are officially developed. Bring it in.
Right? So if you're saying that your base number is 1 crore that are poor, then the BJP would have done tremendously well. You've actually taken a better number than most other analysts have on where we are at the poverty level right now. So, yeah, I don't know.
I would say quite significantly, since our population is
140 crores.
140 crores. Not to say 5 lakh crores is a small amount.
Yeah.
It's to highlight the impossible nature. What are they calling this? Populist economics.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, look, I don't like gotcha moments. I think these days in the news, people thrive on them, right? You just want to get someone to say something so you can say, hey, I gotcha. So maybe the spokesperson that said this didn't have the numbers fully right.
Look, if you're proposing a scheme, it's not a gotcha moment that someone asks you the most important piece of information you would need to know about the scheme, about how it could possibly be executed.
Okay.
So, if we're talking on intent, this seems like an impossible deliverable.
Correct. And that's what actually Karan Thapar himself, who's not historically been a buddy of the BJP, let me put it like that mildly, even he pressed them saying, look, you have to tell your voters how much it's going to cost. And what I didn't like is when he was asked that question, he's like, no, what you're misunderstanding is that voters will know that it's going to cost something. No, but an average voter is not going to know how much a scheme of this scale is going to cost. And even then, what the interviewer said is, look, what the Congress is saying is we're going to come into power, we're going to conduct some surveys, right, which we're going to come to. Right, so a caste survey, socioeconomic survey, we're going to do these surveys, then determine where we're at, and then we'll know how many poor people are there, and then the scheme will be effective. But you've already made this promise that you're going to give it to poor people. So you're actually going to start doing this disbursement theoretically before you even have the data.
Well, the only way for them to now hold suit is that logically they would decide the number later, but now they're just deciding who they call poor later.
Exactly.
You get it?
Exactly. And I think that's a bit dubious, right? That's not exactly a fair play tactic.
It's not fair play at all, because what this may, if they didn't give a number and they just said we're going to give poor people money, and poor people are those that fall below this income bracket, and once we do the survey we'll know how many people fall below that income bracket, and based on that we'll come up with a number. The number's probably like 400 rupees.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not going to be, but you say 1 lakh rupees a year.
You said the word, Rohan. And I think, so the first set of schemes in their manifesto, it's just pure play populism. And what's funny is that in the last, decade, the critiques of the current government have been populism. You'll see it in the newspapers, you'll see it in the New York Times, you'll see it in The Economist, our favorite. You'll see it in all these magazines about populism. How does this not reek of populism, right? You just want to make a broad promise with minimal
intent to follow through.
Or maybe they believe, but that will have deleterious effects on the economy, right? Where it would set you back for decades. You're just going to put such an immense burden on the exchequer. In fact, I believe the numbers, some of the freebies combined would come to almost, a quarter of what your annual budget is. So it's a preposterous amount of freebies. And this is coming from two of us who, right from the first podcast, have said welfare programs is something that we should all be supporting as a government.
I don't think India has an option.
You have to do it. But one is reckless populism just to get votes. And two is meaningful, targeted schemes that can help people, uplift themselves as well. right? And I think for me, right there, this scheme, again, albeit noble, shows a lot of fiscal irresponsibility and should be ringing some alarm bells for voters at least.
Well, I would say it would be fiscally irresponsible if they started going and executing it, but right now it just feels electorally irresponsible.
Sorry, electorally irresponsible. Because you know that at some level you're just, you feel like you're the back foot in this election. So you're just trying to pull something out of the hat to get.
How perfect that it was a round number like 1 lakh.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah,
how
exactly.
How
it has to
perfect.
sound good.
Yeah,
right?
it has to sound good because
Yeah. And I think that's the problem. And you know what's funny and kind of ironic is that a lot of the times, a lot of the critique leading up to this election of the critique of the BJP has been debt. You know, this government has racked up crazy debt, lot of debt. But now you see a manifesto like this and you wonder, is this a case of the pot calling the kettle black? You actually want to engage in some schemes that would rack up even more debt. And conveniently enough, when they're critiquing the BJP, they still don't refer to debt to GDP ratios, which are actually still in a range which is very acceptable for economic growth in the 21st century. There's a certain amount of, I mean, if you look at, say, countries like the US, they have a pretty significant debt to GDP ratio, but that allows you to grow in the interim, right? So this is not a new economic concept. People know that. But it's a case of intentionally using words in a certain way that you can critique, it almost allows you for an ad hominem attack without much logic again. So, yeah.
speaking to how they would execute this plan,
Yeah.
of course they could take on enormous amounts of debt, but there is also something hinted at in terms of the wealth distribution.
Yeah.
And so that could be another way they could do it.
Possibly. I don't know, man.
So you want to get into that point as a link to this? Because the question is, they have these schemes, how are they going to pay for them?
Yeah.
They have an option.
Yeah. Just conduct a wealth distribution survey. I don't know, Rohan. I think that was perhaps one of the scariest things that I've seen a leader say on trail. And here, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt again.
I honestly think it is the case where he has the benefit of the doubt, but the choice of wording is interesting. It may make people want to think that, that's what they're going to do.
Right. They said that.
So let's give some background to it.
So on the campaign trail, they said as soon as they come into power, one of the things that they want to do is conduct a nationwide socioeconomic survey that will then enable them to essentially distribute wealth in the country the right way. So certain media entities have said redistribute. I believe he just used the word distribute. But the fact that you're saying distribute the wealth is already like it
has implications to say that this is like people's wealth that you're distributing.
Correct.
And not just what the government takes in as tax anyways.
Or it has like point blank, like I guess I've referred to him now already once in the podcast, but like that is like a Lenin level implication, right? That is pure play, old school communism. Like, we're going to redistribute the wealth of the country. We're going to say, okay, you're well-to-do, we're bringing you down here. We're going to take some of your money, give it here. So it's doesn't bode well, especially if you want to seem as an attractive destination for other countries to come and invest in.
Tax slabs pretty much do that to some extent. And it's
Correct.
so we have a progressive tax code.
Correct. But
And in some sense, that is a form of wealth distribution, which everyone has. So what they are saying is, no, what we are going to do is above and beyond anything you have ever seen before.
Correct. So what does that mean?
What does it mean?
My problem is that it's a lot of broad promises which have, honestly, massive implications on society and the economy. But you're not really qualifying it with much evidence or data or methodology. Sure, maybe you can argue that a manifesto should not have to go into all of that. Fair enough, I'll give you that. But there's a difference when you say something like this, right? You should at least qualify it a bit. Because, again, the grand irony of all ironies, if you do intend to distribute wealth, are we willing, is the Congress party willing to look at itself in the mirror and wonder how much wealth it itself has accumulated and its people and its coterie have accumulated in the last 40, 50 years? You're looking at dynasties that have been built. Sorry to say this, you're like suckling on the teat of Indian inefficiency. is how you've made money for decades. So are you part of this wealth survey? I would be very curious to know. And I think that's a question that a lot of people will not be happy to answer. So, so it comes to this idea of the survey. Let's come to that, right? So all this, the root of all of this is that, hey, can we do essentially a socioeconomic survey and a caste survey? Again, populist through and through. We spoke about this in the last episode, but see, caste discrimination is a reality in this country. The law itself recognizes that. And it's not that this government has not done tremendous amounts of work in helping these communities as well. Including, I believe it was the BJP, and we can double check this, but they were the ones that passed a bill to essentially go back to the older version. So the Supreme Court had ruled on the SC/ST Atrocities Act and made it, essentially diluted it. And the BJP actually brought it back. So that means if an SC/ST person accuses someone of discriminating against them, there's no anticipatory bail, and you don't even need the FIR, essentially. So it's actually kind of nuts.
It is kind of nuts. I've heard about this.
Yeah, it can be used, and it has been used and abused in the past. That's a truth, and let's not mince words over it, but it's true. But even this is the government that has brought that law back to its earlier strength, right? And they have had a resounding increase in votes from these communities as well. So to say that this government has somehow not supported them, again, it's a trope that's overused internationally. But if you get down to the nitty-gritties and understand what a government is actually doing to help these communities, it's very different. So why is this survey the plank of your election, right? Especially it shows misaligned priorities. I think that's always a thing with me. And the Open Magazine article that we were discussing earlier, they talk about that. Is somewhere there's a cognitive dissonance. I think they're so removed, or they viewed India exclusively through this Western lens, because many of them, they themselves grew up with a Western lens. A lot of those leaders in the party. So
a lot of Ivy League university students.
Correct. So the news that they consume naturally then as a product also maybe guides their thinking in a certain way. So if you look at Bihar, the state Bihar, which has been a hotbed of caste discrimination, it is a state that has been obsessed with caste historically. Even in that state of Bihar, they conducted a caste survey, which was very polemical. But again, it was much ado about nothing. Once they were willing to release the results of the survey, you had like barely a soul going and joining these protests in the street. So the oomph factor, the impact that even the Bihar government was hoping then by releasing the results of this socioeconomic or this caste survey were kind of null and void. It was damp, right? So it even shows that electorally the Congress has not really thought this through if they think this is what's going to give them a win in the election. Because the BJP, what they've actively always tried to do, and they say it over and over again, whether they do it or not is different, but sabka saath, sabka vikas, and that means everyone. And they truly mean that. So they want people to not vote on their caste anymore and just vote if you believe that the government is going to help you. Of course, without changing the protections that you will have if you are from an SC, ST or OBC background. With the Prime Minister himself being an OBC member.
The irony of them sneaking in such divisive politics through what is an inclusionary approach is really quite something. Because if that's where we kind of want to talk about the intent.
Correct.
What is the intent? And do you think there is any merit to the survey? What good could come of it?
The idea is that it will show that things are more, there's more injustice than we've known, and therefore the government will be able to actively help. That is that's the right way of looking at it. But unfortunately, I believe their intent is more dubious. Because it can harbor certain resentment,
fuel divide and conquer type of politics.
Divide, because that's how elections have run for so long. And see, it's like a last ditch attempt. You're seeing it's an existential battle for them and for a lot of regional parties that have based their whole identity on identity politics. That it's shifting. In fact, I read another beautiful article today, Rohan, and I read the intro and I was like, whoa, I've never thought about that. So the governments recently the opposition have loved the idea of North-South divide. Stop saying that BJP represents us in the South, because obviously they've historically never made inroads there because the Dravidian ideology has been very strong. But they're seeing some cracks starting to appear electorally in the South. The BJP is making inroads there. So this article was talking about that, and the author said something fantastic. He said, can you imagine the chief minister of, say, Tamil Nadu, Mr. Stalin, or his son Udayanidhi Stalin, or any of these people going to, say, Varanasi, or going with some of the India Alliance people and campaigning there, going to a northern state and like trying to even pull an audience of more than 100 people? You can't. But if you see what Narendra Modi has managed to do in Tamil Nadu, me being a Tamil person myself, it's crazy. You're seeing a seismic shift, I think, in South India BJP inroads. You're seeing a seismic shift. You're going to see them. I think they're going to win more seats in this election than they've ever won in those states. A lot of credit to Mr. Annamalai, who's there, who's been like the BJP firebrand advocate in Tamil Nadu, and they're bridging that divide between North and South. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I can imagine any of the South guys going and doing that in the North. But here's a gentleman who's Gujarati, who's like even trying to string some words together in Tamil and pulling huge crowds. One of the interviews was like, yeah, my kids have been following Annamalai. That's why I'm like the father saying, I've always been voting for DMK, but my kids have been supporting Annamalai in the news because that's what technology and information access has changed. And I just want to come and see who this guy is. What's this whole deal about? Right? So you're seeing a leader stitch together
what was otherwise very divided political world.
Yeah. Right? So again, that can be said as, oh, this is political centralization. Or is it just good politics? Are you just uniting Indians in a way that was never seen before? And I'll tell you another example, Rohan. When I saw this firsthand, when I was studying for the civil service exam, I was in a cohort with a lot of students from across the country. It was a very cool experience. I got to see people from the furthest east you can imagine, the furthest south, the furthest north. And what I found interesting was that their ambition was to serve as an IAS officer only in their home state. It was bizarre. Actually, a lot of them would not say, yeah, I want to then go and then serve in the center and do something for the country, for India. It's like, no, I want to do something in Maharashtra. I want to do something in Tamil Nadu. I want to do something for the Tamil people. I want to do something for the people in Nagaland. Again, that's not a bad thing. It's noble. You feel that tie to your people. But what they're saying is that as you move forward into the country, the Indian administrative services should have people that are truly willing to go work anywhere. Right? You should be willing to take on whatever cadre because you're going to be a representative of the country. You're going to be a bureaucrat for the country, of the country. Right? So we have a long way to go in stitching together this country and closing up these old fissures. But manifestos like this certainly don't help. And then the other one, which for me, again, it just signals a lot of populism, is they want to introduce MSP, guarantee an MSP as per the Swaminathan Committee recommendations, which goes back to our farm laws. Now, a Supreme Court constituted body, after that studied the farm laws, found that almost, I believe it was 86% plus of farmers actually supported the farm laws, right? So what we saw in the government repealing the farm laws, again, a sign that you're not a very good dictator if you can actually give in and have to repeal a law because of pressure and protest, right? That's the example of a very successful protest. But it showed that a small, very powerful special interest group of predominantly wealthy farmers with connections abroad managed to push the needle on logical economic farm laws that would have broken down this essential cartel like intermediary that's been operating in the agricultural space for decades, right? The APMC mandals. So they were the intermediaries, and this law would have essentially negated a lot of the influence that they've been having over the years. So very logical, sensible laws that were repealed. And here, the Congress, knowing that this is a hot button issue. See, again, let's go to the intent. This has come out to be as one of, say, BJP's weaknesses, that they couldn't actually keep these laws in. They had to repeal it due to pressure. Okay, that's a pain point. Let's just say we're going to give MSP at the Swaminathan Committee rate. Right? Again, that's callous. It's politically, what's the word you said? It's electorally irresponsible.
Disingenuous, at least.
Yeah, disingenuous. So on farm laws, again, you've lost me. So who is that to? That's a small special interest group. So you're actually saying you're willing to ignore
86% of the farmers.
86% of the farmers, some of the poorest farmers who would have benefited so much from these. See, historically, we'd gone into essentially a monoculture kind of society where people were growing a lot of rice. And at the time, it made sense. We had a lot of food insecurity problems, but times have changed. And there's a lot of benefit from diversifying your crops.
Avocados are all the rage in India now, dude. Have you heard avocado chaat?
Yeah.
Making its way to the streets.
All the restaurants, all the fancy shops, but even in the local areas.
The cool part is now it's hit the streets of cities.
Yeah.
Avocado chaat.
I'm not surprised. But see, these farmers can have a very actually lucrative yield from diversifying their crops. But obviously an MSP type law disincentivizes farmers from diversifying. So again, intent for me, not quite there in terms of where can we take India. This is how can we just do whatever we can to beat the BJP, and then we'll figure out what we have to do after that.
It's like making policy decisions based on what will trend more using hashtags.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you've almost given the perfect segue because the other huge plank of theirs is the idea of social justice broadly, right? So obviously they've spoken about LGBTQ community, uplifting those communities. Again, very noble and a cause that even I fully support. But again, this past government, if you look at their objection on granting civil unions, which by the way was a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court, right, that said no. It was in the sense that we have a lot of cascading laws in the country. So it's actually a technical rejection rather than one that's denying that reality.
Or making any sort of comment on what we think is morally
right
it's
or
not
wrong.
Morally right or wrong. It's a procedural decision that is based on probably a huge backlog it would create further in terms of how the judicial process will have to play out if this law was to change. And also the discussion as to whether this should be a judicial decision or a parliamentary decision.
Yeah. So that's what it comes down to.
So I think this deserves its own
conversation entirely.
entirely.
To essentially get it at a position where we can look at it through this manifesto, it's not an issue where there's been a binary where one party is like never and the other party is like yes. The Supreme Court has said, okay, quickly get this through Parliament, try and understand what the way in which we can do this, because there's cascading effects on adoption, on inheritance. We had to pass a lot of laws to protect women because there was historical inequities as far as the rights of women were considered. So there's a lot of laws that would have an impact. And we have personal laws. So we have Hindu personal laws, we have Muslim personal laws. How do all of these essentially reconcile a law like this getting passed? So there's a lot to think about. It should be done by Parliament. That's the line, right? So if Congress is taking this as, again, one of their planks, again, quite removed from what your people want. So they've seemed to have miscalculated the aspirations of India today, right? People want to have a country that they can believe will take them to another level, right? And this is more just like, hey, let's just divide you up again and keep you voting for us. And
you 5% vote because of this. You 12% vote because of this. You 5% vote because of this.
Yeah.
With really nothing unifying them outside really specific laws targeted to maybe give them a ad hominem reason to quickly change their vote.
Yeah. I think one big one that we should probably started with is that they want to pass a constitutional amendment to lift the threshold of 50% on reservations and increase that. They've not mentioned by how much. But again, that's a very, very populist move, playing on caste again. And they actually, most analysts are saying this is a play for the OBC vote, right? Other backward classes vote. BJP has made huge inroads in this segment, and this is a way. And then they want to add EWS, increase the economically weaker section reservation as well. So it's a lot of increase in reservations, which is again a populist caste play, because they know the BJP has made big inroads. So the fact that they've made inroads there should show you that clearly the BJP has also worked on uplifting those communities and working with those communities. But again, I I don't. It shows again electoral or electoral disingenuity, because chances are, see, the 50% threshold was set in 1992 by the Indira Sawhney judgment. I don't believe this current Supreme Court would ever agree to increasing the limit. You know that this is not going to pass. That's why you're not saying the number. You're just saying you're going to increase. You're going to pass a constitutional amendment to increase.
There again brings us to it not having the right intent.
Yeah. I think when we were talking earlier, you had said something very beautiful, like when you have intent but action. Can you just say that again? I loved it. Yeah.
So basically, with something like this, you can call it a political tactic.
Right.
If it's a political tactic that you can't implement and you know you can't implement, it's disingenuous.
Right.
But a political tactic where you want to do something because it's going to get you a voter bank and you know it is going to be something you can implement is just good politics.
It's good politics. Yeah. Say like the Ram Mandir was on the BJP manifesto. It is a political tactic. You know you're going to do it, and you did it. Right? 1, 2, 3. You did all parts of that.
So political tactics can be good.
Yeah.
They get a bad vibe because everyone just thinks they're just
Nefarious,
manipulating me into doing something. But if telling me that I'm going to do something for you and because of that you'll probably vote for me is a tactic, then I don't know how else someone would be a politician.
That's how politics works, right? So then, and you know what particularly irks me about this is, again, it's like, what have you used to critique? It's again, pot calling the kettle black, or the left hand not seeing what the right hand is doing. So here you're saying verbally in your manifesto that you're going to do a constitutional amendment. And at the same time, you're critiquing the BJP saying, oh, if they come, they're going to do constitutional amendments. The Indian Constitution is the longest living document, or the longest living constitution for a sovereign nation in the world. It has been amended 106 times, to be accurate. So it has always been an amendable document that reflects the spirit and the will of the people, right? Obviously with the necessary checks and balances in place. So when Congress is making the constitutional amendments, it's not looming authoritarianism or judicial overreach or reticent courts. It's fine, right? So it's again twisting the narrative, shaping the narrative to help you score some points electorally. Then
moving on, do you want to discuss the Jammu and Kashmir bet?
Yeah, so they have two big claims. They want to immediately give statehood to Jammu and Kashmir, and to Ladakh. They want to include it in the sixth schedule of the constitution. So now with J&K, in principle, even the BJP supports this, and in fact, the Supreme Court itself has said that this needs to happen on a faster clock. So any government that's in power will have to do this, and it's the right thing to do. I don't think this is like as hot button of an item as maybe Congress wanted to make it. But with Ladakh, but see again, and in Ladakh, by adding it immediately on the sixth schedule, there's still security risks in these areas vis-a-vis a very belligerent, secretly so, neighbor like China, right? They are aggressive on their territorial ambitions, especially on our borders. So you have to be very careful. And the Congress manifesto actually hints at that. Like, instead of chest thumping, as they say in their foreign policy, actually getting the job that needs to be done on the border with China. But there's actual security risks and developmental risks by fast-tracking statehood in these places. So if you're in principle not in disagreement, then this is not really a political tool. In fact, it's showing that you're willing to sacrifice a well-implemented statehood just so you can win electorally, right? So going back to our word, it's disingenuous, right? So
or straight up
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, straight up dangerous, right? And that actually opens the door to our point on foreign policy in general. So I actually found the foreign policy piece and the anti-terror piece in Congress actually quite good. Curiously enough, what Shekhar Gupta pointed out, I was listening to his analysis of this. In a way, it's actually a Congress that's different from the last election cycle. Because in the last election cycle, I love the word he used. It's like a college student foreign policy manifesto. Let's all just hug each other and all the world's problems will go away. And it's like a John Lennon. Imagine if there was no war. It's like, no, this is real. We have a neighbor like China that's salami slicing in territories of ours like Arunachal Pradesh and Ladakh, and you have Pakistan, which is belligerent for a whole host of purposes, right? So we have very real security threats, and it's nice to see that Congress this time actually recognizes those threats. So I think that's actually, for me, a win on the manifesto.
Yeah, that's a really good thing.
Yeah, but other than that, the word that they used is that for them, their foreign policy manifesto seems to claim that India's reputation internationally has been tarnished. Right? Now, this comes to something you and I have been talking about for a while now. Right? Only if you're exclusively reading a set of newspapers and magazines, predominantly from the West, will you have this notion. Right? Oh, based on the V-Dem report of democracy, which the entire data collection process of which is dubious at best, you formed your opinion on India as a democracy, and we've lost our reputation internationally on how we responded on Gaza and a whole host of issues. And to me, that's like patently untrue. Right? Or maybe I'm 100% wrong, but on a foreign policy level, we've gone from strength to strength, navigating one of the most difficult foreign policy periods. As a government, you've brokered historic deals, say through the Quad. You've gone ever so closer to the Baltic states, to Europe, and you're walking a tightrope, right? We were taking oil from Russia, but we're still on calls with the leadership in Ukraine, with Russia as well. So they're saying
Shankar said that piece about people were almost criticizing him for having so many options, and he was like, why would I not keep options? That's what a diplomat does.
Yeah, and that's what mediation is supposed to be. You're supposed to try and find a way to make things better through peace. And that is what they've tried in so many regions. Or in terms of, say, rescue and response around the world. They've launched very risky operations. They've helped in cases of piracy as recently as a few months ago, helping fleets on the seas or repatriating people that were stuck in Ukraine at the war. I mean, in mission mode, this government has done some amazing things on a foreign policy standpoint.
But bro, didn't you read the New York Times article where in a dictatorship, I give it 5 years till it collapses?
Yeah, I don't know. That's just, that's academically callous to say something like that. Especially on foreign policy, if you feel like the reputation's been tarnished, if you attend some of the conferences recently and you see the excitement. I mean, I think Eric Garcetti, the ambassador from America here, he himself said like India is where the future is. If you want to see it, come here. So that's how America is talking about us. We are both in conversations with the representatives of Palestine as well as Israel, right? We're also helping and supporting. So even if they say that this government has made a misstep on Gaza, I don't believe they have in the sense that the Congress is making out to be. So what is the reputation that you wish to revive?
I think it happened recently when that whole Canada and India thing came up. I think that's when people started to really notice how much power India is able to demand on a global scale.
Correct. Or like the general assumption immediately at the minute that's what diplomacy is. It's never easy. But the minute there's a flashpoint event, people are like, oh, India-US relations at a free fall. India-Canada relations at a free fall. And then after that, like Modi gets invited for the state dinner in America and is like so well received there, right? So again, there seems to be a disconnect between how the party members of this manifesto are viewing India internationally. Perhaps they need to change their lens. Because I do think from a foreign policy standpoint, there's not much argument to be made on the claim that India has actually done well on a foreign policy standpoint. They can do better, right? So they claim that on China we've not done well. But even there, they've stood their ground where they had to, whether it was Doklam or more recently.
It's certainly not been this embarrassing train wreck.
Yeah. But at least the sobering thing in this is that the Congress manifesto has at least not been as absurd as the Communist manifesto when it comes to foreign policy. Which I think it would be amazing to just read a few highlights of this, Rohan.
Let's read that. I think we've wrapped up on the Congress manifesto and call it for laughs.
Yeah, I think like just, this is just amazing. They said that they want to scrap or exit from alliances like the India-US Defense Framework Agreement, the Quad, and I2U2. So these are like historic defense partnerships or defense and or security partnerships that India has signed with the leading countries in the world. And the Communist Party, India, Marxist, says that they want to essentially exit all these alliances. So some of the strides in foreign policy, they're saying they want to just be done with it, right? Or they want to pursue a non-aligned foreign policy and withdraw from all the strategic alliance with the US and essentially go for some kind of negotiated settlement with China and promote all around relations with China. So I wonder which country would be so happy to read this policy. Certainly, certainly the Chinese would be very thrilled to see a manifesto like this. So see, something like CPIM's manifesto, it's just, if Congress is like electorally disingenuous, CPIM's is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a vestige of another time. You're like, forget disconnected. You're not even in the same football ground.
But the Congress will still partner with the CPIM in states and
elections
Uplifting.
form the strangest of bedfellows, man. Like we were talking about, Arvind Kejriwal of Aam Aadmi Party, who used to be such a vocal critique of the Congress, in an alliance with Congress. So
I mean, same thing is happening with a lot of the people who switched over to the BJP. I mean,
correct. Yeah. And I think that's something where, for me, it's a bit of a critique of the BJP, right? You're taking some people who you would have in the past even say had like a moral, ethical, philosophical opposition to, and you've let them in the party just for electoral gains. So politics is a dirty game at some level. It is. We can't get around that. So yeah, I know it always comes down to, okay, it's a lesser of evils and this and that, but there's a lot of ways in people capture it. But I do believe that manifestos can at least give you a vantage point into intent, if anything.
Other than intent, I think that's something that everyone has noted about how before the BJP came into power, manifestos were not important.
Yeah. Or they were not like nitpicked like the way they are now.
And that's because the BJP has followed through on so many of its claims and stayed pretty firm and true since 2014 and completed some of their points. So if that is something that is making the population more aware of manifestos in general, that's a good thing. And maybe the Congress will take a page out of their book.
Yeah, because they followed through on some things that people would have never imagined possible, right? Ideas that would have, otherwise seemed impossible. They managed to pass it and they said they would do it, right? So I'm very curious to see the BJP's manifesto and see what path they want to take for, this next 5 years. So it's going to be a very interesting election season ahead. That's for sure.
Great. So I don't think we have time to do predictions now.
We'll do it another time.
We'll do it another time.
Yeah, and a quick plug, I would just say elections are 7 days away. So if you haven't registered to vote, go register to vote. I think it's the most important thing you can do as an Indian citizen. If you can talk the talk, you better walk the walk.